My name's Shane Ryan, and I play Brandon in the film Choke. I think Choke first came to me about 5 years ago. Greg had talked about making a Brandon film after we did Samurai Cop 2, and we talked about doing it really quick and easy, I think, just like shooting on a Blackmagic, a lot of stuff on a train. Greg has a fascination with trains, I think. And we kind of toyed with that idea, but then Samurai Cop, I think, was just a lot of work for him, and I think he took some time off and focused on, he's a distributor, so I think he focused on distribution for a while. And then the idea came back. We're in June of 2020 right now, so the idea came back to him, I think, around this time last year. And then I think we met up around this time, and he said he was ready to do it. And then he wrote a script, which I know he did pretty quickly, I think in about 3 weeks. And so I think I got the script in July. And so basically the Brandon, though, is a character that I created in 2004, just randomly one night. I made a movie that I shot with literally under $50 and with no script, and in a 3-hour period, just me and one other actress, kind of two-person in a room kind of movie. And Greg ended up distributing that in 2007, and it turned into a big hit. I mean, considering what we made it for. And but with that film, and I ended up making 3 of those films for Greg, and he distributed all those. But those films were Brandon without really seeing Brandon. There was a ton of dialogue because I barely speak in Choke. So in these films, which were titled Amateur Porn Star Killer, which was a great selling title, I approached them, since I was making them for about $25 each. I approached them as Blair Witch style, just a filmmaker, well, not a filmmaker, a serial killer, just filming his victims, on like a digital, I don't know if it was Digital 8 or Mini DV. I think one was maybe Digital 8, and then 2 and 3 are probably Mini DV. But, just a little, digital camcorder, and each film was basically kind of like an hour, roughly about an hour with each victim, mainly real time. And with me, the killer, recording the victim. So you hear me talking nonstop, as the movies are mainly just dialogue pieces, but you don't really see my face, aside from in the first one you see it for like, as far as like directly on camera, maybe 3 seconds, and then you kind of see angles when I'm killing the girl. And then in the second one, a little bit more, but still maybe 2 minutes. And then the third one, same thing, I think, maybe a minute or 2 I'm on camera. I think mainly at the end of the third one. And I believe Greg said that he believes Choke takes place after Porn Star Killer 2, I think is what he said. And in 2, I do kill the girl by strangling her, which I don't in the first one. I punch her I try to suffocate her with a pillow, and then I punch her to death. But the idea of the Brandon character was that he never uses, for me at least, is that he never uses a weapon. It's all, just whatever's in his surroundings, whether it's his fists, a pillow, strangling, a piece of, at one point he uses his camera in the third one to beat somebody with. But so Greg obviously decided for Choke to focus on, the fact that he chokes all of his victims, like every single one is killed by choking them and strangling them. But then, he came up with this whole other, basically Choke is not my character really at all, or my story. He basically took the idea of Brandon and then presented it to this whole new world, a whole new way of filmmaking. Not a new way of filmmaking, but for this character at least. So he took what was originally a behind-the-scenes character with a lot of dialogue but no script, to a character now in front of the camera with a script but hardly any dialogue, because most of the dialogue is Sarah, the the lead girl, whose name I'm blanking on, Jeannie. It's been a while since we shot it, but so it was a whole different way of perceiving this character, which I found to be flattering, I guess is one word, but just pretty surreal, because I made the first film when I created Brandon out of desperation. I mean, I had wanted to be an actor since I was like 5, but at the age of 5, my dad started showing me how to make movies, or how to edit, because he was an editor, and then my parents wouldn't let me get into acting because they didn't want me exposed to it that young, because Hollywood always corrupts, child actors. Even though I had so many opportunities when I was young, which I've never had since I was like 5. But so I started making my own movies by the time I was like 7, and then I got so focused on being a filmmaker, even though I never wanted to be. I always said I would never direct. Directing's too hard. Like, who the hell would ever want to direct a movie? I wanted to be an actor and a writer. And so I would write all the time, and I would make movies all the time so that I could act. But then finally, by the time I was 20, and I started seeing different kinds of movies that really struck emotional. I mean, I saw one film called The War Zone, which I'd never seen a film that had really hit me in that kind of way emotionally, or just it scarred me like for life. Like, I mean, I think about my reaction to that film to this day, 21 years later, I think, and I'm like, man, I remember that day. And when I realized film could do that, that's when I think I finally decided, okay, I can be a filmmaker. I'll try this, or I'll decide to actually call myself a filmmaker. I'm already doing this, but let me, actually call myself a filmmaker. And I started trying to get my first feature done, which I'd been trying to do actually since I was 10. I tried to make a feature when I was 10, spent 2 years on that, and then again when I was like 15, spent 2 years on that, and then I did it again when I was 20 after watching The War Zone, and I spent like 2 or 3 years on that. And I got so desperate because it was just trying to make a feature film is insanely hard. It used to be a lot harder. It seems to be easier these days, but it used to be a lot harder, and especially when you're a kid and you have no resources, no money, and especially since you don't really want to be a filmmaker, you want to be an actor, so you're doing all this stuff that you don't know how to do just so you can act and tell the stories that you want to tell, because I wanted to be, a writer too. So finally, by the time I was 24 now, I'd had all these failed attempts. I'd tried like 5-6 times now to make features, had shot them all, and just could never finish them in post because there'd always be so many just technical problems and so many problems with the stories having to be changed, because you write something in the script and then you lose this actor or this location, and there's just always endless problems. So finally I was like, well, I'm never going to make a feature film. Let me just come up with an idea that I can shoot like tonight, and something that's would be very easy to edit so I could have it done next week. So like there's no way I won't finish this movie. And then that's where Brandon originated from. So it was pretty surreal. And then the movies ended up being big hits. I mean, for what they were. I mean, even people like MTV got a hold of them and loved them. And I think Wu-Tang Clan somehow, through a music connection I had, ended up stealing, well, I don't want to say steal, but they hijacked the first DVD and were getting high one night and watching it. So, I mean, like, it was just pretty unreal what happened with that movie. And then now, 12, 13 years later, well, 16 years later since I made it, but since it got distributed, to now have the original distributor, who's Greg, also a director, to now be telling this tiny little minuscule, like $25 story movie I had, and making it, like 1,000 times bigger, which is still small, but it's like 1,000 times bigger. So the whole way that it came about, and watching actual sets being used for this Brandon character was just, it felt really good, but it was somebody else doing it, so I couldn't, take the credit, but it was just really fun. It was a lot of fun. It was like a dream come true kind of thing, but it was very just the idea of Brandon going from like, let me shoot this in 3 hours with no script and talk a lot, to now let's spend weeks on this Brandon character, because we ended up spending, I don't know how long, we took like a week or two break at one point, but I think it took like a month and a half to shoot, which is, for one movie, when I shot all 3 of the original movies in like 10 hours total. So it was just really weird. I mean, it was like a regular movie with being done from an idea that I had when I was done making regular movies, when I was like, let me do the opposite, let me be so anti-traditional film narrative, etc. So that kind of traces back to the origins of Brandon and where he came from. But as far as actually shooting this film, I remember when I saw the script, Greg had written it so quickly, and I remember just going like, wow, this is like I never would have thought. It's just really interesting how, you know, somebody can just take just a snippet of your idea or your character and then create something so different. And so I remember going, wow, I feel the essence of Brandon, but it's so different, and which I thought was awesome. And I was surprised because Greg had written the script so quickly. I was surprised, you know, how much I ended up liking it. So I couldn't wait to do it. But at the same time, like, man, I was going through probably the worst time in my life personally. And I remember I was ranting on Facebook a lot because I tend to do that. I hate social media. I only use it for promoting. But when I feel the need to rant, then I end up using it for that. And I need to just stay off of it. But so I don't remember what I was going on about, but I remember Greg saying, are you okay to do this movie? I don't think you're in the right state of mind. And I was like, no, like if anything right now, I need to do this movie because I need something to get my mind off of everything in my personal life. I just had never been so confused, angry, upset, depressed. I mean, I would have days where I wouldn't do anything. I would just lay in bed and just stare at the couch or at the bed or at the pillow, whatever. You know, I'd never been so devastated in my life. So what was great though is I was able to use that because I haven't really gotten to act for other people that much. You know, most of the acting that I ended up doing over my life was for my own films, and then I got really focused on filmmaking, and I stopped acting in a lot of my own stuff too recently in the past like 8 years because it just became too hard, you know, trying to work as a one-man crew and then be in your movies. So I haven't had much acting experience in other people's films, and then I've been lacking it even in my own. So I was able, fortunately I had so much, you know, going on, you know, just in my personal life that I was so fucked up from, that I was able to really just use that when we were shooting. And I think the best performance that I gave was in the scene with Lisa towards the very end of the movie, which was, I believe, the very first scene that we shot, or was the first day. And you know, it's right before I attack Lisa, right before the sand dunes. And I remember actually feeling a lot of those emotions that day because I was listening to music right beforehand that was always music that would instantly make me cry. And unfortunately, I couldn't listen to it while we were, you know, shooting, but I'd listened to it literally right before. And I remember I actually got too emotional, like Greg said, tone it down. And I didn't think I'd be able to ever hit what I hit. So the fact that he had to say tone it down, because I was like, I think starting to tear up and all this stuff, I was genuinely surprised with myself. But it wasn't like I was giving a good acting performance. It was more like I was just reliving all the shit that I was going through. But I think that scene came out the best, which it should have. I think if any scene called for it, it should have been that, because that's after I'd really actually killed Sarah's character and you know, probably had no idea how to react to that because I was so devastated. But it's in my nature to kill people, but I didn't want to kill her. And then so I'm so angry at the fact that I know like Lisa is one of the people responsible for it. So I think that actually played out the best. I think some of the problem was while we were shooting, I was actually becoming very happy, a much happier person. But that kind of worked out too, because I think by the time we were shooting all those montage sequences with me and Sarah, you know, I'm genuinely having a good time by then. And you know, so the whole experience was, you know, was really interesting. I'd never gotten to spend that much time acting, although it was crazy because we ended up shooting 2 films at the same time, the other one being Heartbeat, and we would shoot lots of times we would shoot those on the same day, or we just didn't, when we showed up for set, we didn't know which movie or character, that we were supposed to be in. And Heartbeat, we were getting our Heartbeat. I did have a lot of dialogue, and I was getting my script. I could, literally, as I was coming to set, or while I'd be on set, oh, we're gonna do a Heartbeat scene. Here's today's scene. And my Heartbeat character is so opposite of Brandon. He's like, wearing glasses, and he's just kind of like a spaz. He talks too much, which is closer to how I am in real life, I guess. Or, I don't know, maybe a little bit. But I just remember, like, never having been challenged so much as an actor for either role, and then having them both on the same day. So that was an interesting combo to add. But speaking of the overall experience, with like the cast and crew, I gotta say, I mainly only, as far as regularly, was working with Sarah as far as like a scene partner on Choke, and she had never, I don't think, done anything aside from a student film. She was in school, and that, when you have a great scene partner, that definitely, you hear about stories where people like just didn't get along. They have a love interest and they hated the person, and that just sounds miserable. Versus she was just everything nice. I mean, like, just so warm, so friendly, so easy to talk to. But then I could just totally strangle her and get totally banged up. Never bitched, never complained, about anything. I did a few times because I got hurt pretty bad. But she, like, there were so many times, like, I was like, man, I probably just totally, hurt her, or like we had to do so many things on like rough grounds where it really hurt. Part of that's because I'm twice her age, so maybe it was hurting me a lot more. But I was like, always thinking, oh man, she's gonna like, be pissed at me, or she's gonna like cry, or just be traumatized because it's her first like real acting role, and she's just getting beat to shit. And she just I mean, I've never seen anybody, everything was just like so easy for her. And then the lines, she had so much dialogue, and she would be rehearsing it kind of like out loud to herself beforehand, and she would just be kind of like rolling through it frontwards. I think she did backwards. I don't even know. It was just like, I felt very, she probably was intimidated having it be her first acting role, but I felt very intimidated by her because I don't have the training that she has, or the talent that she has. But it was good because I always felt like, okay, I gotta really make sure like I don't mess this up, and so even though I had created this character, I felt like I was in a totally fresh new world where I really had to try my hardest. And it was definitely the most challenging role that I've ever had physically. I mean, you wouldn't believe how much work it takes strangling people and screaming over and over. I mean, it's so exhausting. And you feel like you're gonna like kind of like an aneurysm or something, like every time, like you literally feel like you're just gonna, your head's gonna burst. But that was interesting because I really tried to go, I felt like it was getting so ridiculous, so a few times it just was like, I'm gonna go the whole Nicolas Cage route, and just kind of, just be completely ridiculous with it, which I actually think is such a fun way of acting, especially for people like me who like really love acting, want to be actors, but we're not that good at it. just go all out bonkers. I think is going to be my approach from now on with anything. And I've thought about this for a while, but I really enjoy it more, and at least you can't really go wrong, because like even if you look over the top, then it's like fun. If you look bad, at least it's fun bad. Because I've spent too much of my life focusing on filmmaking that I just don't have the experience or the education or the natural talent for acting. But I've been getting to do so much of it lately with Greg, with all these movies. And so working with the same, we worked again on Heartbeat, and the other person I spent the most time around was Chris, who is acting in a lot of these but producing all of them. And he's another person, like, man, if I was him, I'd be crying because he's working a regular job all the time and working on the movies. It's like he's always doing something, and no matter what problem comes along, he's able to just deal with it with a smile. I've never seen anyone smile so much in my life. Like, it's so creepy, but in like such a soothing way. Like, you just can't ever be mad or frustrated anymore when you see Chris smile. So like, I don't know how he does it. So he's like, all these people, like, I'd be like, I can't believe they're not crying. I'm crying because I'm really stressed out. I'm not used to like putting so much work into movies during the production. I'm used to putting all of my work on the post-production end. You know, I'm crying when I'm editing, which is that's, I think, more where I think Greg really comes into the picture. Is very much in the cinematography and very much in the editing. Like, he definitely has, like, now that he's made enough movies, I think he definitely has, if you're watching his stuff, you definitely are watching a Gregory Hatanaka film. I think if you watched, I think he's got about 10 movies by now. If you watched all of them together, you'd be like, okay, like, he's got his own style. And I think that's always great when somebody has their own style, even if it takes getting used to. Like, a lot of the things has taken me, I think, years getting used to certain things. Like, Greg likes watching people eat and watching people scream, and there's certain things he just seems to be obsessed with. But I think I'm understanding it now that I see this is really just his thing. Like, in his filmmaking, bones, this is just what he needs to do. And it's been really interesting working with him over the years, because I started off the first film of his that I was in, because I've had two different relationships with him, one as being an actor, and then one as being a filmmaker, for films he distributes. So the first thing I ever acted in, it was just like a little small thing, and then the second thing was Samurai Cop, where I actually had to do fight scenes and train, and then and I did like a little thing in another movie that got cut out, where it was really quick, but that was another interesting experience with having to do a lot of screaming for no reason. And then from there, now it's Choke, which was again, despite having hardly any dialogue, was definitely the biggest and hardest role I think I've done, and then Heartbeat, simultaneously. And then we just wrapped another film called Quarantine Girl, which I play more myself in that, but I only had about a day to prep for that one. We're shooting movies so quick now, but yeah, it's just been I don't think I ever would have expected all my acting work having come really from doing Brandon, because that's really where most of my acting work is now coming from, is having had done Brandon and having Greg having distributed those films, now getting to retell Brandon, and then now doing all these other films with Greg, and him being the one who's employing me the most, 80% at least, if not more, of the acting I'm getting. So it's weird how, again, Brandon, not to sound cheesy, but basically gave me life for all the lives, he takes away. He's basically given me life as a filmmaker and as an actor. And it seems wrong to say this, but I basically owe, I think, a lot to him, or this character, which is really weird saying that, but because he's such a horrible person. But he's fun to play. I mean, well, sometimes I didn't like playing him in my films. I thought that made me feel really gross, even though I made them. But he was definitely fun to play. And Choke, the way we shot it, there's so much that didn't end up in the movie. I mean, we had the script, because I like to shoot without scripts when I make my films. So it's interesting how Greg shoots, because he has a script, but I feel like he shoots just like me, where he has no script, where you just end up going like, oh, let's go over there, very Terrence Malick, ish, in a lot of ways, where it's just, I think he actually shoots more like Terrence Malick, even though I'm definitely, I think, more the Malick fan, because Malick has scripts, and then what happens is then he'll be like, oh, like somebody's playing with a firefly over there, let's shoot over there. Oh, this is happening over here, let's shoot over here. Or, hey, we don't know where we're going to turn the camera. And I think Greg tends to work like that a lot. Like he has the script as like a blueprint, and then he kind of throws it out the door half the time. So I love doing that as a filmmaker. So it's kind of funny, because as an actor, it's almost more like I get kind of irritated. I kind of want, I think, all or nothing. I either want it to be very precise, like let me try and get my lines down, or let's just completely be, loose. And I think that's kind of what Heartbeat was because I was able to like improvise a lot on Heartbeat, which helped since I was getting my, you know, my scenes like literally like a few minutes beforehand. But I know when we did Quarantine Girl, I was having such a hard time improvising because it needed to be more specific, so it relate, you know, because it needed to connect to what was going on, you know, with the story a lot more. And I remember I was having such a hard time because I didn't have enough time to memorize it, and but I also couldn't improvise as much as you know I felt like I needed to, and I was playing probably closer to myself than any of the other films. So it's interesting how that's worked. I've been experiencing and learning a lot, so it's kind of hard to keep tracking all my thoughts together and make it come out in one cohesive paragraph at a time. But yeah, the whole thing's been pretty crazy. I'm trying to think, like choking people. Man, I remember each time, like, I'm trying to think back now. I just trying to make sure it looks real but without hurting somebody is really hard, because like you have to strain yourself without actually, you know, straining the other person. I mean, without actually putting any, like, hardly any pressure on them. Yeah, that was more challenging. And I remember too, like, it was really hard because I would have literally like one word. Like Sarah would have like this huge monologue, and I'd say like one word, and then she'd have a huge monologue again. And I remember ad-libbing a lot, which I think most of it got cut out, but I would just say little things here and there because it was so hard. It seemed like it was easier to me. You have dialogue, I have dialogue, you have dialogue, I have dialogue, or somebody else had all the dialogue, and all I do is like listen. But when you have just that one word, because I get nervous when I, you know, act, and it's like, you know, you're like, shit, I don't want to miss my line. But when you only have one word in the middle of like huge monologues, I find that it's actually more stressful than anything else. So that was interesting. I did not know that. It's a lot easier when you have a lot of dialogue and you can't remember it than when you have just one word and you have to remember to say it at the right time. Because it's weird, because it's like you almost I would get caught up listening to Sarah, but then I'd be like, shit, you know, when do I actually talk? And then other times I'd be like, okay, don't get caught up listening to her, even though you want to do that because you want to look present. I was like, but I'm not going to remember when to say my one word. So then I would try to remember when to say it, but then I'd be focused on that. So I mean, that was definitely an interesting experience. I wasn't expecting. I don't know. Again, it's going back to, it was just great having people you can work with that you get along with. Nicole was another one who I worked a lot with. Not, well, I guess on Choke, because she was always there doing something behind the camera, but in Heartbeat she ended up starring in it, so I had all my, you know, almost all of my scenes with her on Heartbeat, and then in Quarantine Girl all my scenes were with her, you know, and so she's incredibly just the most chill person. And then yeah, and then like I think Nicole, Greg, Sarah, and Chris are the people who I've been constantly around, and it's just, I think the only person I've ever had any issues with was Greg, only because we've known each other so long. So there's one time when I got on his nerves, but that was it. And I can definitely get on people's nerves, so I can see that happening. But it was for a good reason, because I was trying to make sure that we got the scene, that it looked good, because I think I get hit, and I want to make sure it looked good when I got hit. But I was being kind of catty about it. But yeah, this is starting to feel, just making all these movies kind of like, you know, just the way Cassavetes, you know, and you know, and Gina and you know, Seymour Cassell and all those people, you know, would just always, you know, just get together and, you know, almost trade places sometimes, because I think he would even hand the camera to certain people, in some of his earlier things at least, maybe like in Faces, I thought he did that. But I know certain people would switch on producing, and then obviously Cassavetes would be sometimes in front of the camera, so it's starting to feel very much like that, which I know Greg is a huge Cassavetes fan, at least he talks about him enough, I think he is. So even though these are nothing like his, like Cassavetes movies, but it's definitely starting to feel like that. Just interesting time though too, you know, because streaming is really hurting, you know, the market, and we're having to pump out 20 times as much work to make a fraction of the money that we did back when we had the amazing video store, which I miss more than anything in my life. Anyway, I will not get on a streaming rant because I hate streaming, and I will just never shut up about how terrible it is and how much it's ruining cinema. But you're watching this on a Blu-ray, so you rock if you're watching this. So yeah, keep physical media alive. We need it. Pays about 1,500 times more, no joke, than streaming. Literally, no joke, not even exaggerating. That's how awful streaming is. And you get to own this Blu-ray forever. It'll never just vanish or be discontinued. You can get it signed if you think we're special enough to have us autograph it. If you go to convention or whatever, ever, you know, if we can ever have a screening again, movie theaters hopefully are opening back up. And it's not censored, unlike the streaming. And I could just go on and on because streaming is terrible and physical media is incredible, and we need to reopen video stores. Yeah. Will Brandon return? I think that's the question. I don't know. Well, actually, yeah, because I'm doing a whole spin-off series to Porn Star Killer. Ted Bundy had a son. But again, not much time is on Brandon. It's more on how he's affected people versus the first trilogy was on his, him and his victims, but mainly on the victims, since you barely see me. So I think Choke is like a one and done deal of actually really seeing how Brandon operates on camera as a narrative, and not a mockumentary like the Porn Star Killer trilogy and the upcoming Bundy trilogy are both mockumentaries. Maybe Choke too, but I feel like I've played him enough now, and hopefully we can just do a lot of other really crazy and bizarre films. The more bizarre, the better, I think, at least for acting. But yeah, the Cinema Epoch Cine Ridge Entertainment production world will probably have a lot more movies since we've shot like 6 more since we made Choke last September. And so stay tuned. Signing out.